Epigenetics and Generational Trauma in 14 minutes with me, Novena-Chanel, the Equilibrium Coach. Let's go.
Hey my loves, how are you? So I've been asked to explain what intergenerational trauma is, as I speak about it quite a lot in epigenetics. So this is just a quick bite to explain to you about intergenerational trauma. It's something I love teaching students and talking about with clients and just friends in general. But I will start off by saying this to you. When you were in your mother's womb as a baby, you as a woman had the egg that created your children now. Or better said, when your mum was a baby in your grandmother's womb, she already had the egg that created you. Powerful, right? So that is 3 generations being homed in a womb. If you think about grandma, and her grandma and her mum, whatever was happening in that lifetime for that person, it could have been they had a bereavement, it could be stress. There's lots of research on the Holocaust survivors. There's a great book, I'll bring it to the book club soon, by Mark Woolen. It doesn't start with you. And he speaks about some of the research or case studies of the survivors of the Holocaust. And it shows that 3 generations later, those who were never any part of the Holocaust, they're the grandchildren of, had sensitivities to certain things like certain smells and certain sounds. And it could only be linked to the experiencing epigenetics, the generational transfer of DNA, genetics of the grandparents who were part of the Holocaust. There's also another great book, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child. I mean, I got books for days, yeah. I love reading. And it shows, this is way before we talked about it. At that time, it was quite like pseudoscience when it was written, but it's now been shown to be some truth. That when they believe the baby couldn't hear, the baby could hear much earlier in the womb than we first realized. And they had like, someone who was hypnotized and they were singing a song a lot. It's a song they used to always kind of relate to, like the song. And it showed that when his mother was pregnant with him, she had like a Mardi Gras and like a party. And there's a song they used to play a lot. And they had no knowledge that in the womb, much earlier than we realized, he remembered the song. And there's research into that. When both my children were younger, more so my son, I would play classical music to my stomach. And when he was born, that was the only music that would really soothe him. I've got videos on my personal Instagram of my daughter, and she'll start to cry, and I'd put on Little Mo, I know, Superwoman.
I've been sent to save your day, and things will be the same.
I play a lot when she was a baby. There's so much into the unborn child and when you're being carried. And what epigenetics shows is that, you know, there's some people who have diabetes in their family and that one person doesn't get it. It's about the predisposition to something. So your sensitivities can change. You can have diabetes in your family, you never get it because although you're predisposed to it, your lifestyle doesn't support you catching something, not just because of how you eat, but the stress you allow into your life, the way you breathe, you know, that's very much connected to our health as well. There's so much other factors, but you don't get it, but you're predisposed to things. That's your genetics. It might be to health conditions, it might be to mental health conditions, something like depression or BPD or things like that. These things, it's nature and nurture. It might be in your nature, your predisposed. Can I find the word? Predisposed to it. There's the word. But the nurture you're experiencing doesn't mean you get it. That's why you can have 2 twins of the same genetics and one may have a different experience than the other because although the genetics are there, the nurture has been different. There you go. I found my hat again. I found my counselor academic hat again and I'm speaking properly. No more Bobby D goop. So epigenetics, again, it is the genetic transfer from your family. Now, generational trauma, I've mentioned for the Jewish Holocaust, where it's there. I think it's got a lot to do with what's happening in the world right now. Trauma of people who are traumatized, acting out that trauma. But that's a whole different conversation. But if you think about it, it's done on that population, not so much on Black African Caribbeans, who we have the transatlantic slave trade and so much more things that have happened to us. And you think about how that's affected our parenting and just our health. We are more predisposed, that word's gonna get me, more predisposed to things like sickle cell and high blood pressure. That when we have certain cancers, they ravage us much more easier. There's so much more things that we face. There is research that is it Atilia? I can't think of the actual name of it, but ours is shorter because of the stress, because of the racism that we suffer. I know it sounds like, oh, here she goes, but it's a fact. I will find it and post it when I put this video up. But who mentioned Gabor Mate spoke about it in one of his talks about trauma.
The telomeres of mothers who look after chronically ill children, their telomeres are shorter, and they're 7 or 8 years older than their contemporaries.
Why?
Because the stress shortens the telomeres, and trauma shortens the telomeres. And so this gets into social issues as well, because of course one of the ways that oppression affects you is it shortens your telomeres. So let me read you something here. Multiple levels of racism, including interpersonal experiences of racial discrimination and the internalization of negative racial bias, operate jointly to accelerate biological aging. Our findings literally suggest that racism makes people old. They looked at the telomeres of Black and white middle-aged women, and they were shocking. Black women were found on the average to be biologically over 7 years more aged than their Caucasian counterparts. And it's not genetic, people, because their biological relatives in Africa don't have shortened telomeres. That's a function of racism in America. It gets underneath the skin.
We know that when somebody is constantly in a stressful environment, your tolerance level shifts. There are people who are always hypervigilant because you're not sure when the next attack is coming. That's going to have an impact on you and how you process the world. On your DNA, your genetics will change. Your cortisol levels and adrenaline and everything changes. It changes your whole system. There's so much research now going into it to show that when we are constantly under stress, it has an impact on our mental health as well as our physical health. Now, if you think about that person who is pregnant under that constant stress, under daily rushing of chemicals in their body, and that's another thing again, we get addicted to chemicals. You know, those people that are always miserable or always angry, but your emotions release different chemicals. And just like cocaine, it's addictive. So there's times where we will set up circumstances or situations to get our hit of the chemical we are addicted to. Now, you've got somebody now who has a baby in their womb that is addicted to certain chemicals, that is managing stress, that is hypervigilant, who's maybe going through relationship problems or work problems or anything else. And that's now gone onto that baby in the womb. And that's a baby girl. That baby girl also has the egg that's created that next generation. That's epigenetics. Then you now raise that child with all that stress that you've experienced, the parenting that you've experienced, the things that are positive, but the things that maybe are also negative. And you will see it in families. This is not a generalization, but it probably will fit. It will drop where it's meant to drop. You'll see a family of women who are all single. The grandmother, the mother, the daughter, the granddaughter, or they're not in stable relationships. And you could say it's like epigenetic. No, that's generational trauma. It may wear its hat very differently. They're all strong, independent women, Maybe, but there's something about the genetics, there's something about the trauma of what it means to have a male around. Was there somewhere in that family line where there was a man who wasn't maybe strong, who wasn't present, who wasn't consistent, who betrayed? You have taught generationally how to be a single woman and probably do it perfectly and brilliantly to that capacity, but you've also learned not to trust. And we don't trust, we can't let love in. And we can't let love in, we can't be our full selves. And we're not our full selves, we suffer with stress. We suffer with anger, depression, and they've shown that anger and depression so often in black women are actually signs of anxiety, but it shows differently in us. Now again, think about how that generational trauma has set up a pattern of being in the world and affected your DNA and affected your life and your thought process and who you have around you and how you accept support and how and who you befriend and probably who you work with, because your work structure, and you think about it, take time, think about the dynamics in your workplace. Your manager, is it supportive management or management leaves you to it? Are they micromanaging you or are they two-faced and betraying you? Where does that remind you of your family structure? Was your mum very supportive, or was she someone who left you to it? Did she kind of backstab you at times? Did dad, was he someone who had such high expectations of you and micromanaged you? Are you now seeing that in your work structure? Your work structure often represents your family structure. So if you're the proactive person at work, getting all the deadlines met, was that you and your family? Were you the oldest child? I'm telling you, there is so much intergenerational trauma, epigenetics, and how we repeat cycles. So I am saying to you today, sit down, take time, map out your family tree and have a look at the cycles that continue to repeat themselves. It is mind-blowing how great grandparents, down to the grandparent, to the daughter and son, to the children, you will see some common themes, even from family that you have never met before. Yet here we have it. There are husbands who have wives that are a similar way, or sons who marry women like their mums, or daughters who marry fathers like husbands like their fathers. Even if they haven't been physically present, there might be in itself, you have a partner who's not physically present or who is physically present but emotionally not. You've completed and repeated the cycle of not being supported by somebody. It's fascinating. So take time, map out your family tree. I would say do it with a therapist. It doesn't have to be me. If it wants to be me, holla. But do it with a therapist. So it's very therapeutic, but also it can be very triggering starting that process. But once you start the process and you see the connections, if you're a very spiritual person, you'll see that, again, it's spirit. Some people might say it's our soul family reincarnated again. We're trying to learn that soul lesson. Those who are more religious, maybe Christian, it's in the Bible, the sons of the Father, 3 generations. However you want to explain it, there is something there about how we pass on our trauma and how we continue to repeat cycles until somebody breaks the cycle for themselves. I hope that's been very informative to you, to explain a little bit more about generational trauma and the beauty, the magnificence of epigenetics. My name is Novena-Chanel, better known as the Equilibrium Coach. I am a counsellor, a Counsellor Supervisor, a life coach, a Counselling Lecturer, a Reiki Master, yoga teacher, public speaker, and many, many more things. So come and check me out at www.theequilibriumcoach.com or on Instagram, _equilibrium_coach. Again, just been seeing clients all evening. I am knackered. I am going to now do some lovely self-care and my own wind down routine, because self-care is the only care you need to focus on at this time of night. Mwah.